9-year-old children. The solution is not arming teachers. Have you ever worked in a school?
Jamaal Bowman was like shaming Republicans, and him and Thomas Massie got into a shouting match. And when Jamaal Bowman was like angry and yelling at Thomas, Steny Hoyer walked up and like put his hand on Jamaal Bowman's arm, basically trying to get him to calm down. And that, for some reason, like that made my blood boil, because it's like, no, this is the outrage that you should have had 5 fucking years ago. So how dare you basically try to get Jamaal Bowman to calm down? You should have been this angry years ago, Steny. Like it just where like the outrage here is justifiable. It's just this whole situation is really frustrating. This whole country is frustrating.
If you want, we could watch a bit of that. This is Jamaal Bowman here.
Ask them, and then go to the Senate and ask the same questions. They're cowards. They're all cowards. They won't do anything to save the lives of our children at all. Cowards. Pressure them. Force them to respond to the question, why the hell won't you do anything to save America's children? And let them explain that all the way up until election day on 2024. Let them explain it all the way up to election day on 2024. They're freaking cowards. They're gutless. They're not here. I'm talking about gun violence.
You know, there's never been
I'm talking about gun violence.
a school that allows teachers to carry.
Oh my God.
Carry guns? You think more guns lead to more death? More guns lead to more death. Look at the data. You're not looking at any data. You're carrying the water for the gun lobby.
No.
Look at the data. More guns lead to more deaths. Good states that have open carry laws have more deaths.
In every school
States that have open carry laws have more death. Are you listening to what I'm saying? Calm down. Children are dying. 9-year-old children. The solution is not arming teachers. Have you ever worked in a school? 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 It's a yes or no question. Have you ever worked in a school? You will not answer my question. Don't stop and talk to me. Okay, I'll bring it down a notch.
I think that's fully justified.
Yeah, I think what's so annoying about that interaction is so you can unpack it honestly, but it's that he stops and he asks him, like, what are you talking about? Like, you don't even know, there's an ongoing thing, you're not even sure what the issue is. And the minute he answers him, your finger is in his face like an authority with this position that you're now barking back at him. Moments ago, you had no idea what this man's impassioned speech was even about. And now you're an authority wagging your hand in his face, doing all this. And what is so annoying is that, like, the way the other politics, whatever they are, as they're walking by, these other white guys, they stop and they're like, acting as though, it's an altercation now, right? Like the worried white people. And it's annoying because it's like, this guy is already talking. This is a controlled environment. It's no, who he is. This is look where we're at. This is Jamaal Bowman. You know what's going on. There's no danger afoot. This guy feels comfortable enough to stop, engage him in the now back and forth, whatever. Now the white people are like, oh, you know what I mean? Over at Jamaal Bowman, like, I was like, oh,
Yeah. Here where Steny Hoyer goes to him and like just tries to stop him here.
Yeah, and there's a second part of that where Thomas Massie gets frustrated and tries to walk away, but then Jamaal Bowman follows him, and then Thomas Massie's like, get away from me, basically, after he's the one who decided to engage with Jamaal Bowman. And it's funny because he's pretending as if he has these solutions, which, it's more guns in schools. But as Matt Binder pointed out,
Thomas Massie.
the Parkland shooter, that happened in an environment where a guard was armed and was too afraid to confront the shooter. And so these solutions of more guns in schools is nothing more than a thinly veiled attempt to placate their constituents. But the reason why they propose this is because they take money from the gun lobby. And even though they know that more guns equal more gun deaths, well, less guns equal less gun profits. And so they know that they have to do that. They have to play the game. Thomas Massie, if you look, for years, he's been saying, oh, well, I haven't taken money from the NRA, for quite some time. But if you go through the history, and I shared the link to the video that I posted today when I talked about this, he's taken money indirectly and directly from the gun industry. And over the course of his career, it's tens of thousands of dollars. So it's not like all of a sudden, if you stop taking the money, you're no longer beholden to them. Of course you are. You're corrupt. You've been bought and paid for. So they know they have you. You don't have to, give them more money.
It's less about the NRA and more about the gun lobby generally. Like my understanding is the NRA doesn't have as much influence as they once did, but there's still a gun lobby. There's still
and in a lot of ways, the NRA has kind of won the culture war in a lot of respects. For people in America, associate the fact that you have to have a and I'm going to reiterate this, well-regulated militia, but they have the right to bear arms. That's so synonymous with the idea that guns equals freedom. You cannot restrict guns in any way. Where it's like, okay, let's get down to brass tacks here. Well-regulated militia, that was for land-owning white people, all right? That's basically what that meant in that period of time. It wasn't for women. It wasn't for black people. That's what the well-regulated militia was. And now they still extrapolate that today in the modern day and age to be like, well, this means that I'm allowed to have an AR-15, a tank, grenade launcher, get me nukes. Why don't you have nukes, America? Where's your freedom? That's all I got to say.
Yeah.
How many of you have nukes?
Well, by the way, like, you know what?
Pile in his lifted truck, okay, to go coal roll people while waiting in fucking McDonald's drive-thru. Okay, it was never for him. It was never for that. It was always supposed to be for a militia because back 300 years ago, we were living in literally different times. You needed to have people who were ready to take arms to go to battle for your country. That is not the state of our country anymore. The rule, the way it's defined, it doesn't work in the modern age. And surprise, someone who wrote a document over 300 years ago couldn't predict the future. How shocking.
Yeah, and what they mean when they talk about the Second Amendment, they mean white people. Because look at Philando Castile. Did they give a single fuck about him?
Nope.
Who had a gun? Look at all the pearl clutching with trans people who are showing off with their ARs and stuff like that. You know what I mean? They don't want trans people armed, people of color armed, just them.
The reality is, if there are different canons of constitutional interpretation, right? But it's originalism that Republicans cling to is what it is. And reality is that if you go by originalism, the Second Amendment would be read out of existence, right? And so I actually was taught constitutional law in law school by a conservative, like a really conservative guy. And so what he would say is he said, because it would, right? A well-regulated militia, blah, 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 blah. All the different actual originalism interpretations of it is that it was never meant to apply to what our current thing is. And that also does not mean it cannot be, nowhere did it ever mean in any variation of it that it can't be restricted or regulated like every single other right that's found in the Constitution, whether in explicitly or through constitutional cases. But nonetheless, so how he would justify it is he says, you have to read the Constitution with a reliance theory, with the underlying belief that people have relied on this right for this amount of time, so you can't read it out of existence. That would be that's their mindset. Then the minute you get to talking about Roe v. Wade and stuff like that, it's get out! I don't care. I don't give a fuck. It never made sense. It doesn't hold up to originalism. So it's not there from, I would argue that it actually wasn't there from the beginning of the country's history, so it's not quite as fundamentally embedded. They actually in the opinion, when they overturn Roe, actually go down that silly ass line like, it's not from the beginning of the country's history, so I wouldn't say everyone's really used to having that right. I wouldn't say that. It's not. It doesn't go back that far.
And as you mentioned, there are restrictions on rights, like restrictions on free speech. There's defamation. There's incitement of violence, threats. So the idea that, this is a right. Okay, how about a right with restrictions like other countries have? You can still own a gun in Canada, but there are restrictions on that ability to own that weapon. Stuff is basic.
And we do it with all this stuff, right? It's the same way, like, even if you think, like you said, like free speech, like the fact that hate speech or fighting words are not considered part of that protection of free speech is something the Supreme Court found in a constitutional case. Obviously, you don't see that written in the Constitution. They do that all the time. Everything is regulated, right? Like that's the whole thing. Even down to the fact that we have committees in Congress was something they had to like make a case and find and come up with if you give it an intelligible principle, like I guess you could find it. And Scalia was like, what did the Constitution say that? And they were like, could you chill? Could you chill? So they've always regulate everything. That's how it goes. Only the Second Amendment to conservatives interpret to you can do nothing with it except Black people. They can't get no guns, not legally, not illegally. You smell it on them, lock them up, lock them up, lock them up, lock them up. Like